Okay, so I've got a couple of guides, one for the world strategy, one for the base, which gets you towards the point where you're ready for combat, making sure you're in the best situation to be able to do that. Now, I was going to do this as one whole thing, however, I think the combat comes down to two sections. You get in prepared, and then there's the actual on-the-ground action. Now, you've got a squad to put together. They start off as rookies, and as you progress, you'll notice that they specialise, and then you get to start picking abilities for it. You get a Grenadier, you get a Ranger, you get a Sharpshooter, and you get a Specialist. Now, if we have a look at the Specialists, this is the same for everything. We've got our Soldier abilities. We'll look at some of these a little bit later on in the video, but we'll focus on this to begin with. As you rank up, you get to unlock extra abilities. Now, in some cases, some of them are bad, but in the majority of cases, it's really as a trade-off. The Specialist gets this drone called a Gremlin that you can either specialise in what I would say is a defence or medical side, or in an attacking version. So I tend to make sure that I've got a Specialist that is equipped up to at least the field medic level. Now, the reason for that is because you get to carry additional medikits for the price of one, and you also get to send your drone out to people to be able to heal them. There are other ones which I unlock a lot later on, which are even better on the healing side of things. That does mean, though, that there's a trade-off for things like this haywire protocol. So you'll want to get one Specialist that's set up more towards the healing side of things, and you'll want to get one set up more towards this combat side of it. The haywire protocol becomes really useful later on when you're playing against enemies, mechanical enemies, or also when you're on a time-based mission and you need to get to locations where you have to hack a device, because it can really help you out when you're running out of turns. We'll use this one as a generic example as well. Don't forget to upgrade your weapons. So every gun that you've got needs to have some kind of ability added onto it. Now, there's not many at this point for this gun, but you need to make sure that you've got something on. You can read and make a decision. None of them are going to take anything away from it, but you need to make sure that when you're equipping weapons, you're not forgetting to put these on. And there's another stage where you might forget or miss it, because there's some of them are brilliant. You can get instant kills almost, and you can get extra ammo. It can make a huge difference, so you need to make sure that you're keeping your eye on that. These PCSs as well means that you can give them enhancements, so you'll pick some of those open. I haven't got any spare for this particular soldier at this point in the game, but you need to make sure whenever you've got those that you put them on the soldier. You can get rid of them, but you lose them, so it doesn't matter if you've put one on. You'll get better ones later. You can swap those up, and that will give you benefits to your whichever stats it's relevant to. The loadout is another point where you can sometimes forget what you've actually got, and you've ended up equipping them with not such good weapons. So down here you've got an option to make weapons. If you do that, it will take all of the weapons away from everyone that's been assigned, and then it means that you can then select them in here to add them. Otherwise they'll just get default ones that don't have any of the abilities that you've attached to it. Don't forget to use all of your utility items if you possibly can do. I always recommend to have the nanoscale vests. They're a very cheap buy, and if you've got a spare slot, add them in until you struggle with things like medkits. This guy really should have a medkit. Your armors, as you move through the game, you'll get different types of armors, so choose one that's actually appropriate for the soldier that you've got. So have a look at what they offer. If you've got a Ranger, which we'll look at next, you want something like the Spider or the race suits, because they play into their abilities. So think about it logically with whoever you've picked. Specialists pretty good with the Predator armor or the Warden armors when you unlock those because of the additional slots. Okay, we'll have a look at the Ranger next. Gravely wounded, she's having a nightmare. So again, PCS, weapon upgrades, all the same. These are savage with shotguns because you can move them quite a lot of distance and get them right in. Now, soldier abilities for your Ranger, you can either go down for your kind of sneaky approach, or you can go to your assault approach. These are again really difficult to pick. This one here just grabs my attention a little bit with the Blade Storm. That's really useful later on when you get enemies that rush you, because you can just attack enemies that come within melee range. useful too, as well as the implaceable. Run and gun is one that I nearly always put on my rangers, just as a tip there. It's really, really useful because you can close down a long distance, and it sometimes can be the difference between winning and losing. Concealment I tend to not even bother with, because after we've broken concealment we look at the combat section a bit. Not a lot really of benefit of going back into that. Right, we'll have a look at the Sharpshooter. I have a big fan of the Sharpshooters. Soldier abilities of the Sharpshooters go between Gunslinger and Sniper. Now, it's a frustrating one because I like all of these abilities and I want them all to have it. Lightning Hands is really useful because you get a free shot. Death from Above is very useful because you'll nearly always be able to get your snipers into a higher position, and it means that you'll use less actions. So combining that with Lightning Hands means you get to have quite a lot of shots. Deadeye is very useful, but the aim penalty is pretty savage at the start of the game, and because your stats won't be very high, you end up missing the majority of the shots, but it can be a game changer later on. Return fire I tend not to use because Long Watch is excellent, as you'll see in the combat when we have a look at that, because it means that we can cover a lot of ground with our Overwatch. And of course you can trade the other ones off as you unlock them. And finally we have the Grenadier. Now the Grenadiers basically split between destroying stuff or being able to absolutely murder things with your chain gun. Explosives are very, very useful, so I sometimes go down that route quite heavily because you can remove cover. If the enemies have no cover, they can't advance on you as hard. If the enemies are behind cover and you can wipe out cover, then you can essentially get a flanking shot on them. So Grenadiers are essential to have as part of your team. At that point, you will then be moving on to starting missions where we actually load out to get onto the jet, whatever it's called, and then we actually land, and then we start with the combat. So we'll look at those in a separate video.